So, Mr. President, why did you fire Director Comey?
Wasn't doing a good job, very simply. He was not doing a good job.
Did it affect your meeting with the Russians today?
Excuse me?
Did it affect your meeting with the Russians today?
Nope. So Comey, no longer his homie. And Mr. Trump does it again, flipping more scripts than a coked-up screenwriter. Look what he's done to the Democrats.
Donald Trump has tried to put himself above the law. And that's not how it works in America.
This is not just a scandal. The president's actions are neither Republican nor Democratic. They're authoritarian.
We have a deeply insecure president who understands that the noose is tightening because of this Russia investigation, and that's why I believe he has let Jim Comey go.
There's a winner. Now, this is the same crew that wanted Comey gone. So Trump does what they asked for, and now they hate it. It reminds me when someone says, hey, I think I'm going to take up jogging, and you say, hey, I'll join you after work, and then they say, I really didn't mean it. That's the Democrats. They damned Comey, and out of bipartisan benevolence, Trump grants them their wish, which is why their stuttering outrage over his firing makes them look two-faced, which now requires twice as much Botox. But what about the firing itself? Let's separate the action from its execution. The act, defensible. The execution, flawed. He could have let him go in August when half the media are drunk picking sand from their navel. No one would have noticed. He could have done it professionally instead of shooting him in the public square. But expecting Donald Trump to stick to formalities is like expecting a dog to meow or a cat to bark or Chris Matthews to make sense. Let's face it, there's no downtime in this administration. Imagine if the movie Jaws only had shark attacks, no character development, just characters being eaten. That's this White House. There's no off switch. He's our Spinal Tap president, where everything is always set to 11. And maybe one day, but maybe one day, he might realize you can't be on DEFCON 5 all the time. Of course, that'll be when he invents DEFCON 6. So I've talked about, Dana, this idea, you don't have to be in a prison of two ideas. It doesn't have to be treasonous or absolutely wonderful. It could have been that the firing was correct, but kind of tacky. I mean...
Right, and at the time it was interesting because you've used this concept of being allowed to have two competing ideas, and right here in my notes I wrote two competing thoughts.
Right.
That you can believe that James Comey needed to go from the FBI,
yeah.
But you can also believe that this was handled poorly and that it leads to more interest. If they thought this was going to put the Russia story away, it actually just lit the fire under it, turned up the flame on it, legitimately or not. That's what it did. And expecting abnormalities from the White House, absolutely fine. But expecting that the coverage is not also going to be ratcheted up is unreasonable.
Yeah, and also the coverage helps everybody. It lifts all boats. So there's...
Including the Democrats. There's a reason they're going overboard and overreacting.
Yeah. Because
they're raising a lot of money and trying to figure out a way to get back on their feet.
So I want to... take your comment and position it to Jesse. If he wanted the Russian story to go away, firing an investigator wouldn't be the way to do it. But he must have been aware of that. Of course he would know that that would do that, but he did it anyway. Is there some kind of plan that we're not seeing, that he's actually got something up his sleeve?
Yes, it's a grand plan that we all can't see. I don't think he cared about the optics because I don't believe he thinks there's a Russian scandal. So then why cater to it?
Right.
And everybody likes to say, you know, he's not a normal president. Well, America didn't want a normal president.
Right.
That's why we elected Donald Trump, because normal hasn't been working for a lot of people. And let's remember, people sent Trump to Washington to say, you're fired. He had a hit show about this. Everybody in America loves watching people get fired. Yes, it wasn't like the classiest way to do it, but I think this sends a message to a lot of haters out there, even in the federal government right now. You better watch your back or you're going to get canned. Let's also remember, Comey works for us. We don't work for Comey, so if he's doing a bad job, let him go.
Yeah, I don't think that's my point. Is that I think Democrats and Republicans both wanted him to go, Kimberly. But now the Democrats are apoplectic about it, which is, again, it's team sport politics. That you change your mind depending on who's on
Well,
power.
they'd be super upset if all of a sudden Donald Trump said, okay, you know, I believe in climate change and global warming. It's like, whoa.
Well, that's about to happen.
Yeah, well, you never know. So the point is,
Wait till next week.
he evaluates the situation and he makes a decision. So he had evidence presented to him by someone who, you know, had almost near unanimous support in getting in, right, to say, listen, this is something that we think that the president needs to act on. He's entrusted those two individuals, his AG and his deputy AG, to do that investigation, to bring him the evidence and the recommendation. The president followed that recommendation. The problem that people are having here is they don't like it, the Democrats, when he does something that they actually wanted, and then they feel like they should be against him regardless. So it's an issue of optics and it's an issue of process. Was the right process followed in terms of how to handle this? Perhaps you give the guy a call. Okay, you can maybe object to that. I don't really hear anybody saying that Jim Comey was doing, you know, a bang-up, stand-up job where this was somebody that we were saying this is the shining example of the FBI and the director at its best. No, both sides were objecting to the way that he handled himself, and I certainly, as I said, as a former prosecutor, object him overstepping his grounds and making, it's not his decision as to whether or not an indictment should be brought. He simply is to present just the facts, ma'am. And then what he did instead was, being judge, jury, executioner, usurped the power of the then Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, and tried to make the decision for her and tell us all how it was going to be, and that's just wrong.
You know, Juan, do you think Jesse has a point about the fact that Trump didn't care about the optics with Russia? Because it seems that's the thing that everybody on your side, the communist left, has been saying, that like clearly this was to impede a Russian investigation. That's the obvious thing you would think, which makes me think, A, he didn't care, or B, he's got something else going on cooking up there in that impulsive brain of his.
Well, I think actually the reporting today suggests that he didn't anticipate all the blowback.
That's true.
Right.
So he didn't have a plan, and he didn't see that he's going to need a plan.
Right.
So, but the thing about it is when I listen to Kimberly say, oh, well, this is what the Democrats want, or I hear Greg Gutfeld said, oh, it's sort of benevolence. I think you said bipartisan benevolence.
Yes, compassionate, conservative.
I have two thoughts. One is, boy, there are a lot of Republicans out there saying, hey, I'm troubled by what I'm hearing. A lot of Republicans out there saying, oh, well, maybe we need a special prosecutor here, right?
They want to
and I hear people like Jason Chaffetz saying to the Justice Department, hey, maybe your Inspector General should look into this firing. I hear Jeff Flake saying no acceptable rationale for firing at this time. Richard Burr saying, the Republican head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Comey's firing is a loss for the nation. Charles Krauthammer on Fox News.
Now, who's he?
A little guy, comes around once a week.
Okay.
But Charles said, guess what? This is inexplicable that you would fire him now. So Kimberly says, oh, the Democrats wanted him out back in July. Well, that was July. And he was. Nobody says he was doing a bad job investigating the Russia issue.
They take issue with the timeline as to the timing of it. But nevertheless, you know, Dianne Feinstein and Clapper have both come out and said there is no evidence of collusion.
There's an ongoing investigation, Kimberly.
Okay, is what I said untrue?
That there's an ongoing investigation?
Both of those things are true.
So the point is, that was the information that we have up to this point, right? That there was no evidence of collusion. So what you're suggesting is some kind of like conspiracy by the president to remove Comey, so then therefore the Russian investigation, collusion, just disappears into thin air.
Let me just say, I am not talking about...
But that's asinine, because that's not going to happen.
I mean, that's... Let me respond
Comey gone doesn't erase it like, you know, the magic marker eraser.
But what he did was he decapitated, to use the language I read today, decapitated the man who's the head of the agency that's pursuing the investigation.
So what he actually might have done is made it worse for himself.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Maybe.
But what he actually might have done, inadvertently and not meaning to, is made it worse.
Yeah.
Because a special prosecutor is maybe not necessary, but if that's the direction that people are headed. But interestingly, the Hill isn't the place that makes that decision. That decision's made at the Justice Department.
The Justice Department's not going to appoint a special prosecutor, and usually special prosecutors, don't they look at criminal issues? This is a counterintelligence investigation, so there's not going to be a special prosecutor.
Well, we don't know.
So you can put that to bed, Juan.
We don't know.
It's a pipe dream. You can't cover up a scandal that doesn't exist.
Well,
where's the scandal?
Because there's...
Where's the scandal?
Before the police are saying...
What collusion took place between Trump and Russia?
What we know today, news for the top of the show, the federal grand jury subpoenas to Flynn Associates, right?
A business
Congressional
record.
subpoena to the Treasury's criminal division for financial information.
You're
on
looking
Trump and
for a
his associates.
scandal instead of how most scandals happen in Washington when there's something that went wrong, like targeting a Tea Party or selling guns to Mexico and have them kill a border agent. And then there's the cover-up and the investigation.
They only like scandals if it involves Republicans.
Right.
We've learned that. They went nuts for Watergate, and since that, anything that ever comes up is nothing.
Benghazi.
Yeah, Benghazi, forget about it. You want to see more hypocrisy? Let's see more hypocrisy from these hypocrisians.
Oh.
What Comey did, I respectfully disagree with my opponent. What he did was appalling, and prosecutors from one end of America to another know it. If Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein does not appoint an independent special prosecutor, every American will rightly suspect that the decision to fire Director Comey was part of a cover-up.
You don't release this kind of information before an election. This whole episode will be reviewed by directors in the future by the Department of Justice as sort of an abject lesson in what goes wrong when you violate these DOJ policies.
I don't think anyone thinks this is unrelated to the Russia investigation, and that's exactly why I think a dramatic step needs to be taken to restore public confidence, and that step ought to be the appointment of an independent counsel.
Dana, we listened to that, and, well, we pretended to anyway. I still maintain, and I'm going to use my same point earlier, that there's some kind of strategy about flipping this script so that people no longer think that Trump and Comey were close, and that now he has all the people that hated Comey defending him. I think there is some strategy here that might, in fact, be working because the Democrats look kind of hypocritical.
Well, I think that's what they were hoping.
Yeah.
But I also think that I don't think this worked out the way they thought it was going to at the White House.
Does life ever, though, Dana?
I think this is not, well, no, but I think that they, like, look at the travel ban. It's not that different from how they rolled that out.
And what did you say about that? The communications?
Well, the communications, like, any communications team that if they had known that this was coming would have said, can you give us 3 days? We just want to make sure we got to nail it, lock this down. We're going to make sure. You can fire him, Mr. President. It's absolutely your right to fire him. I just want to make sure that we preserve the good press that you've gotten in the last 2 weeks. We want to make sure that you continue to be a winner. And instead, they don't know. Or they are given such little notice that are unable to do that.
They're in the bushes.
Right. Not wanting to do. And
you were with the Bushes. He was in the bushes.
We figured it out.
It's interesting. So I was just thinking about the U.S. Attorney scandal. I do that in air quotes for those of you listening on radio because I was the deputy press secretary at the time, and then this investigation took so long. It went all the way through to the end of the administration and beyond. And what happened was President Bush was absolutely well within his rights to fire 7 U.S. attorneys.
Right.
He didn't have to give an explanation. Our biggest mistake was giving an explanation.
Right.
And that's exactly what President Trump did yesterday in his letter.
By putting that
saying that there's cause. So now what's going to happen? You know that Jim Comey is now on the defensive, and he's going to have the right to defend himself. He's going to be called up to the Hill next week, and he is going to try to defend his honor and answer the questions. This story will just continue to go, rather than, as you suggest in your monologue, doing it in the quiet in August. Very calm.
He's never been a quiet professional, though, quite honestly, you know.
Well,
and
neither
so
of them are.
No, but I wonder just how he's going to handle himself with this. I mean, obviously it was traumatic what happened, but nevertheless, when the president makes a decision like that, he acts on it. I think the disconnect was, like you said, the communications needed to be like right on top of this and focused.
And the president should
represent the president.
I don't know exactly what happened. But what I can imagine happened is that the president didn't bring in enough people into the decision to let them know about it. And if he could trust them,
you know why?
With his decision making.
Probably worried about leaks.
Well, let me just make another suggestion.
Well, that didn't work either. If they're worried about leaks, now we find out that their staffers in the White House are like, whoa, I told them not to do this.
Yeah, well,
right? They want to defend themselves.
This is a problem that we should ask Dana about, because the messaging just struck me as like, wait a second. even if you wanted to believe the president, to put all your trust in the president, that he had the right to do this and he simply acted because, as he said today, Comey was doing a bad job. Oh, but then the letter coming from Rod Rothstein says, oh, it's about what happened with Hillary Clinton back then. Then the president puts out a letter and says, it's about Russia, and I'm glad you told me that I had nothing to do with this Russian thing.
He didn't say it was about Russia. He said he wasn't doing a good job.
He said, yeah, a good job. And then you have Sarah Huckabee Sanders come out and says, oh, well, Trump never liked him anyway. What is the real reason?
Well, here's
the White House doesn't seem to have one.
Well, here's the thing, Juan. I honestly don't think, listen, I agree the White House botched the messaging and gave the Democrats an opportunity to seize a narrative and make it about Russia. But for the Democrats to make it about Russia, I don't think that helps the Democrats. I mean, it just shows how out of touch the Democrats are. They have nothing in their holster. There's no policy to create jobs or give people better health care or protect our safety. They have no policy prescriptions to make this country rich and safe again. And to go back to Russia over and over and over again, American people don't care about a Russian conspiracy theory.
Oh, no.
They don't care about that. They just want to make money and take care of their kids and have better health care.
Oh, it's okay if Russia interferes in our elections?
They didn't. And actually, your team testified on Capitol Hill. They made no impact on the election, and it was unquantifiable.
Everybody, all the intelligence agencies have certified that Russia interfered in our election.
Tried to interfere.
No, they did.
Nope, tried to interfere.
I think influence is a better word.
And they didn't
tried
win
to
it
influence
for
the
Trump.
election, but there was
That was the conclusion of the investigative agencies. They were unable to make a determination that they officially swayed the election to Trump.
Of course they said they interfered. What they said, and I think this, I'm going to try to help you because I think they said there was nothing about corruption of the voting machines or the actual vote. But in terms of interfering and hacking, there's no question.
Who obviously interfered in elections?
I'm sorry?
Who obviously interfered in elections? President Obama with France.
What?
He endorsed the guy.
Well,
what about Donald Trump's tweet
Trump
for Le
is
Pen?
president.
Can we just
It's
say
time
something?
for you to get over it.
Dana, let's just, because you bring up a point here, and this is important. Words do matter. Yes, there was an attempt by Russia to influence the American election.
They did.
No, you said interfere, and there is no evidence.
Interfere.
No, hold on. There isn't evidence that they actually were able to effectuate a specific outcome or affect the voting in this country.
I think there is.
Where is the evidence
What
of that?
state did the Russians win for Trump?
Let me just say, if you'll let me speak, Nate Silver, the pollster, has said he believes that in states like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, where Clinton lost by less than 1 percentage point, Comey's decision to issue that letter.
Silver predicted that Hillary was going to win. Why should we buy that analysis?
Silver gets credit because he said 30% chance Trump would win.
Does anybody think that the fact that Hillary didn't show up to campaign in some of these states,
this is all
might have had a problem with the outcome?
You guys are so gone. You are serving Trump here by saying that somehow this has nothing to do with Trump and Russia.